Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Studio Insights. We have the Belvista Studios team, Kim, Victoria, and me, Hannah. And today we're very, very excited to have a guest with us, Nicole. She's also in the learning and development industry. So yeah, she's going to be here to ask us questions today and learn with us. And for any of you who don't know, the intent of Studio Insights is for us to be curious, to learn from each other, and to become better practitioners and better at what we do in the learning and development space. So thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited to get started and participate in this conversation. So thank you.
Awesome. So we'll start with you, Nicole. Do you have any questions for us that you would like to ask?
Yes, I have 4 questions that I prepared earlier, and without sounding like a cooking show host. The 4 questions that I have are some questions that I had when I started out in the industry all that time ago. And the 4th question that I have is a question that I've got in my mind at the moment. So it's very current and very topical. So, from an instructional design point of view, you're speaking with the client or the business unit that you're dealing with. Assessments, knowledge checks, quizzes. Do they have to be in every module? Do they have to be in every project that you ever do? Some people might say, well, I'm doing a quiz. What are you really doing? You're checking my knowledge, or are you just testing my short-term recall? What benefit does it bring? What value does it add? So I thought I'd put that question to you, because writing quiz questions, writing assessments is not easy,
You get to pick who you want to answer that. Normally we pick, so rather than us jump in, we will all share, I reckon, but put someone in the hot seat.
Hannah, you ready?
Oh, pressure. Okay. I think so. When you design learning or training solutions, I think the most important thing to focus on is what would they have to do in the real world, or what actions would they need to take to be successful at the end of the learning experience. So when I'm designing a learning solution, I just think, okay, what are the actions that my learners need to take, and what would be the best way to show them how to take those actions? So in some instances, it could be a quiz if I think that's a good way for them to practice. But for other learning solutions, I might think it'd be better for them to go out into the real world. So I might have an action like go out and try this, go have a conversation with your supervisor about this, or practice with a buddy. So for me, it's like very dependent on what the actions are that they need to take and what would be the most realistic way for them to practice taking those actions. So when they're in the real world, they're more likely to be able to do it because it reflects reality. So yeah, I think for me, it really depends on what the action is and if I think it will add value for them to practice through a quiz. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It helps me reflect on, well, what is it that what's the behavior that we're trying to change here? And does an assessment or going out and speaking to an expert in the field, or someone who's been in the business or the industry longer, testing your what you've absorbed through the training, going and reflect through that expert and just check your knowledge that way. Yeah, I like it. It's really thinking differently. It's not saying that the learning that we typically know as is being there and sitting in front of a computer for hours. It's taking it out into the real world and just really stretching your muscles and testing it out there. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, thank you. Helps to reflect. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to always question our intent. Whatever the task that we're doing is, what is our intent of this? And when we have stakeholders that are like, there must be a quiz and it's 10 questions, like, well, why? Why do we need a quiz? Like, what is behind? What are you trying to measure? What are you trying to change? What are you trying to hold people accountable to. So there are a couple of questions that you can talk to your stakeholders around. How will this add value to the goal that we're trying to achieve through this solution?
Yeah, very good.
I'll just shout out, because for further learning, for Nicole and anyone else that's curious about the scenario questions, they are really effective. So although it's quizzes and stuff that we're talking about and assessments, you could just build your learning based on that and not have any pre-information and just do like a multiple choice quiz, but it can be scenario based. So we actually have a resource on the Creator Hub, and I think it's writing effective scenario questions. The link will be in the description of this video, but that's a good resource if you want to write better scenario questions or write better multiple choice quizzes or assessments as well. Further learning.
Because a concept that I've been sort of thinking about lately is, rather than having those formative or summative assessments, having a reflection piece at the end, during the module, at the end of the module, and almost have an executive summary. So, you know, these are the key takeaways that, you know, we feel that you need to take back to the workplace. Because what we're wanting to do here is change some of your behavior or change some of the approach that you take to your work. So yeah, it's different schools of thought, but yeah, I agree with Hannah that, you know, it comes down to the topic and what we're trying to do at that time. So yeah, thank you guys.
Good.
Question 1, tick.
Tick.
Tick. So I've done my human-centered design, and I've gone out and I've speaking to those at the coalface, the people that will actually be doing the training, before I've actually started writing things. Thank you. And I've got a project goal where we've got a question that we would like answered by the end of the training course. And I've written a 45-minute storyboard, and I've submitted that to the subject matter expert and the stakeholders, and they were saying, we're actually wanting a 90-minute piece. I'm like, well, I've covered everything that needed to be covered. Do I push back, you know, professionally, of course, and just say, well, look, you know, everything's covered. Why do we need this extra training? Why are you looking to pad it out? So I guess I'm looking for some strategies or some thinking around, hey, we've got everything covered. Do we really need to find another 45 minutes? Victoria?
Well, I kind of think that is a bit similar to your first question, especially if you do have like your project goal or success statement or whatever it is figured out already, like using that to go back and question the stakeholders and ask what they think might be missing from the story. Like, to me, the 90-minute thing is kind of like saying we need a quiz or something like that. It's just jumping straight to the solution. It's not looking at what the actual problem is that you're trying to solve. So yeah, I would kind of reflect back on what the question or goal that you have is with the stakeholders and ask, like, is there something from the existing 45-minute storyboard that you think is missing or that hasn't been met? And look at it that way. And then maybe then there is an extra few minutes or something you need to add on, but not just like assuming straight away we need it to be 90 minutes or we need it to be quiz or whatever it is. Like, look at the actual problem you're trying to solve. And use the questions like Kim was saying before, like, what's the intent of doing it, for having it go for 90 minutes, or like what is the extra things that they want to achieve that weren't in the initial
That's really good. I agree, Vic.
Love that.
100%. We're talking about this in our human-centered design cohort. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, Kim, where someone asked, like, how long should a module be, or how long should a training course be? And from our perspective, it doesn't matter how long it is. It's just around whether it adds value or not. So like, if someone wants a course to go for 90 minutes, like, why? What's the intent behind that? And potentially it does go for 90 minutes. And if every single part of that course adds value, then that's awesome. Or it could last for 2 minutes. And maybe that's all that's required for them to get the information that they need to change their behavior. But yeah, I think Victoria was on point. It's just around, if they want it for 90 minutes, just asking how will that help us to meet your goal? And then it just helps them think, because they're like, oh, actually, I don't know how it'll help me to meet my goal. Like, why do I even want it to be 90 minutes, and help them think through their own thinking. So I think 100%, like, don't just say, yeah, let's make it 90 minutes. Like, ask some questions and help them to understand why they want it to be that length, whether it'll add value.
Because, yeah, I totally agree, because there is some thinking out there that the quantity of training is equal to the quality of training. So that's not always the case. I totally agree with everything you're saying there. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, yeah, we're talking in the HCD cohort. I don't know if you know Joe Rogan, the podcaster on YouTube.
I don't believe that I do. I will write that down.
Well, you don't need to watch, but yeah, the point of it is he is like, I think he is one of the most famous podcasters in the world. Like, everyone listens to him, and some of his conversations will go for like 3 to 4 hours, but he is like really, really successful. So when people say that people have a short attention span and can't listen to something for that amount of time, like, if it adds value, and he does add value, people will listen for 3 to 4 hours. So it's just like, it doesn't matter about the time, it's just what value it brings. I believe that.
That's very cool. I must check out that podcast. I love podcasts, so that sounds amazing. So he's obviously got Joe Rogan.
He
Must have some sort of formula, like, I guess, Ira Glass. He has this real fantastic formula of a hook at the beginning of the podcast. So why is this? Helps me appreciate, hey, this podcast is really worth my while. This is really worth my investment of time. This is something that I'm going to get out of. So I guess it comes back to that adult learning principles as well, doesn't it? So yeah, I must check that out. Thank you. A 3-hour podcast, that would be quite a thing to go from go to woe, but yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to give Belvista Studios a shout out. The content that you have on YouTube, and the insights and the shares that you have with the community, thank you again for doing that. During COVID, it was great to walk to my local coffee shop and listen to your backlog of YouTube insights, and some of the live streams that you had on Instagram as well. It was a great way to enjoy that stroll and get my coffee and listen to you guys and share your experiences and knowledge. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, great.
Oh, thanks.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Thanks for choosing to learn with us. We're just great.
No. It was great. I was only just reflecting the other day that we've just had the tennis here in Melbourne, and you've got these junior players, these young professionals that are coming through, and they've got their coaches and they've got their mentors and they've got their team. And then you look at the other end of, you've got your top 10 and top 5 players. I mean, they're at the top of their game, and, they've been professional players for a while, but, they still have mentors, they still have coaches, they still have a team around them that help keep them on track and identify those bad habits that might creep in and help those players be the best that they could be. So strange analogy that I just used there, but yeah, it's great to have that sort of help reset your thinking and help shape what you're doing and keep yourself on track as well. So Belvista Studios, you help me do that. So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Well, you're doing it for us now as well. Like, your questions are challenging our thinking, and that's like why we do it as well, as to be held accountable to the world, to challenge our thinking, because we get in our little box and the 3 of us, but you here, I'm sure, like, the girls, I know I'm sweating a little bit, so you don't know what's going to come up, and it is challenging to think about, okay, well, what is going on in Nicole's world, and what's her experience, and how is it different from ours, and what is she seeking to learn, and can we add value, and can we translate? And even I'm listening to Victoria and Hannah, and I'm so proud of their answers, because I'm like, that's awesome, because the work that we've put in as a team is shining through for me to be proud of the responses that they're giving. So it's just a lot of love.
There's so much love right now. It's great.
All right. You keep going. 3. This is all about you, Nicole. So.
Oh, that's a bit special. I'm a perfectionist. and I've written the storyboard twice, and I'm starting to self-doubt a bit, and I'm really wondering whether this storyboard's going to add value. Do I swallow my doubt and present it to the client or the manager or the stakeholder or the SME? Is there some sort of magic bullet that tells me when a storyboard's ready to go? Or do I just learn from my experience and just keep pushing through? That's certainly a question that I had when I was starting out, and I'm sure there are other people out in the industry that have the same question as well. So I'm asking that on behalf of a lot of other people.
Even us sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I probably have the exact same question, because Kim and I literally spoke about that yesterday, where I really struggle to finalize a task because I'm a perfectionist as well, and I want to get everything exactly right. So sometimes I'll send Kim like 4 versions. Like I'll be like, yep, this is the final one. And then I'll send another version just because I'm like, oh no, I think I need to adjust this, and just keep making updates. So I 100% understand where you're coming from, Nicole, but I will not answer that question because I do not know myself. So Kim or Victoria, if you have any insight, that would be great.
Vic, you go first.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer it either.
Okay.
Really apply this myself. We have talked about it a bit recently with like any kind of self-doubt, whether it's with work or personal or whatever it is, like specific tasks or projects, or could be anything. But I guess always like taking the time to reflect and think like, what evidence do I have that the storyboard isn't good enough, or that, I don't know, one page of it doesn't quite meet the goal? Like, is there actually any evidence when you look at what goal you're trying to achieve and what you've created? Or are you just thinking, this isn't, like, I'm not good enough, this isn't good enough, or whatever like that might be? Because I know when we do our storyboards, we do have like an individual goal or something we want to meet for each slide, basically. And that's like our point of reference once we've written the content for it or designed it or whatever it is, to look back on that goal and think, does this content meet that? Like, has it achieved that? And I think if you look at it like that, you'll know then whether or not it's good enough. Like, does it meet the goal or does it not? And I think, yeah, everything, like all of that content there answers that goal or whatever it is. Like, then it is just about stopping you from saying it's good enough. Maybe, I don't know.
No, that was really good. That was really good.
Really good. It's if I could just quickly jump in there, Victoria, you've just made me, I just had a light bulb moment there. Like, if you're writing slide per slide, it's almost like, well, can I explain something in a 30-second slide as opposed to a 2-minute slide? You know, and that would typically be the judge as well. Something that I've just recently started doing is I'll write a piece, and then I'll actually use my mobile phone and I'll record myself and I'll listen back. And that helps me sort of turn the tide on the difference between what's something that's written or what's actually something that sounds like it's been spoken. And then by listening back, it helps me go, oh, I just repeated myself there, or that didn't actually quite make sense. So it really, I personally think, brings it even more back to that human-centeredness. It doesn't sound like a textbook so much. It actually sounds like a person is speaking. Well, we use a lot of narration anyway. So yeah, that helps. But yeah, Victoria, thank you for that. You just like that slide and writing to that slide and thinking about the attention span of typical people, or like myself. You know, if you haven't got that information articulated, I think within the first 30 seconds, 45 seconds, then maybe I'm waffling a bit like I am now. But yeah, thank you.
That's really cool.
I like the idea of recording it too. I haven't thought of that before, but I think
that
sometimes you do get stuck in like the actual words on the page, especially if you are rereading it 200 times.
Yeah.
Getting it right. I think that is a good like way of looking at it a bit differently.
Yeah, I love that.
Kim might have more suggestions.
No, I think you've covered, I believe what you said, Vic, is really like just useful, is what evidence do I have to believe this to be true? And being able to identify behind, it is a fact right now, or this is some story or some meaning that I'm making up myself. And then when you figure out, okay, I'm making this up, this is just my head telling me you're not good enough and all that kind of stuff. What Vic said was being very clear on your goal or the intent. So we have an overall project goal, but each screen, if we're thinking about a storyboard example, continuing here, in our storyboard, we have an intent or a goal for every screen, and we have that written down. So each sentence we put in, is that meeting the goal or not? So if we can go through it and trust our process, I think that takes the pressure off us and the human shit that comes out. So then we just trust the process and go, yeah, I'm meeting the objective of that screen. I'm satisfied that everything adds value to that. If it doesn't add value, I take it out. Next screen. And you just break it down step by step. Because then when you finish your storyboard, say it's got 20 slides in the PowerPoint, you can feel confident that the work that you've done added value to each screen, which then meets that overall goal. So I feel like that is just when you can trust the process, it allows you to kind of release any stories and meaning that you're making from stuff. Because at the end of the day, your work, everything, perfectionism, your version of what perfect looks like is subjective. It is so, the four of us would have so different opinions on what perfect looks like. So therefore, does perfect even exist? No. But how do we hold ourselves accountable to produce quality work? Make sure that we're hitting that goal at every point of the project or the task that we're undertaking.
Agreed.
I think I like what's useful as well that you've taught me, Kim, is because sometimes I think like, oh, what if there's spelling mistakes, or what if there's double spaces, like little things like that play on my mind. I'm really worried I'm going to leave something like that in the storyboard. So we do we'll check the whole storyboard for just double spaces. So it's like you're present to that task. You're not reading the content or worrying about whether the content makes sense or if it meets the goal. And if you do each of those tasks individually, you can be present in that moment to that specific task. Because I know sometimes I'll go through and I'll be looking for spelling mistakes, and then I'll be like, oh, wait, that doesn't make sense. And then I'll update the sentence. And then I'm like, wait, did I check the spelling on the next paragraph? And then I get overwhelmed. So I think breaking up the tasks as well is really useful.
It's pretty easy for me personally to get distracted. I'm looking at typing mistakes and then typos, and then I find myself rewriting a paragraph, and then I'm finding myself going and doing something else. So I've forgotten what it actually was that I started out to do. So something that someone told me years and years ago, back in the days when we used to print out things and we didn't have iPads and that sort of stuff, if you've got a printed copy of something, actually turn it upside down and read it upside down. And that helps the eye sort of find things that wouldn't normally, because you go into this muscle memory, don't you? And you don't see those typos and you don't see those spaces in between words.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
I'm just thinking of a resource to help people. We've got that QA checklist on the Creator Hub. It's a free resource, and so is the scenario one. And I think it's more specific to QAing an e-learning module, but it literally is like you're focusing on alignment right now, and you just go through every screen for alignment on the left and the right. Are all the headings the same font? And then is the body text the same font? So it really helps you get down to a granular level to produce higher quality work because there's less errors throughout.
And I think the overall end product, taking the time to actually wanting to correct those little things just adds up to a higher quality piece of work. I think learners appreciate it. Learners can see it. It speaks volumes. Just those little 1% and 2%ers. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Question
4.
Huge fan of Kathy Moore. I think she's amazing. Love her work. And the action mapping flowchart, often have that in front of me just to make sure, especially in the early stages when I start speaking to a stakeholder or a subject matter expert. So here's a hypothetical, but it's pretty close to my current dilemma. So anyway, indulge me, please. gone through the action mapping, and it's looking like that it's actually a cultural or an environmental. It's not necessarily a skills gap or that kind of thing. So yeah, after speaking with the subject matter expert and some staff, it's looking like it's a cultural thing. And following Kathy Moore's action mapping plan, it's kind of like, well, it might look like that training won't be the solution here. I was wondering if you could share any insights or any reflections, or if you were happy to share any of your experiences of maybe a similar situation. Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, or if I'm asking you to give some information you're not comfortable about. But yeah, I just thought, yeah.
That's all right. We'll just stop recording and see you later.
Yeah, where is that? Kim?
What is your okay, so you've done the good work. Well done, first of all. So it's come up that it is a cultural or environmental issue. What are the specifics that have revealed? Let's actually use your one right now.
Okay, so it's really quite topical in Australia at the moment. You know, the really sad events, alleged events that have happened in Canberra, Parliament House. So, you know, and there's a lot of respect and equity adverts that are happening in Victoria. I don't know about Queensland, around respecting women and, you know, trying to, you know, have an equal playing field and, you know, respect people and, you know, try not to stand over people, and, you know, everyone deserves to be heard and everyone has the right to feel safe at work. So, you know, there's a potential that, you know, well, what you know, as a subject matter expert, think, okay, well, obviously I need to get some training out there, because, you know, this is something that obviously what may have happened in our workplace. We may have had reports, or, hey, this is quite topical at the moment, and I want to create a culture of caring and empathy in my organisation. So I want to nip it in the bud to make sure that this may not happen. I want to show my workforce that I'm being proactive, and, you know, I'm conscious that this might be a thing. So yeah, that's the angle. That's where I'm coming from. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other specifics around the actual cultural stuff? Like, because so a couple of the things you're saying is like respect women, and I'm not following this story, so I'm not aware of it. So right now I'm just being an instructional designer.
Sure.
But I guess the benefit there is I can be curious, right?
Yeah.
And apply instructional design to support you, hopefully. So what I'm hearing is that at the moment, we need to put out, someone is telling you we need training to help our workforce respect women, get some equity happening, and people to feel safe at work, okay? And with that, I guess, and you're getting a sense of, you know, there are some things we can train and there's some things we can't train. So I think it's a really good idea. Like, my process there would be to go, what are the things we can train and what are the things we can't train? So within respecting women and feeling safe at work, there are actually actions and behaviors, which is what Kathy Moore talks about, that we can focus on in training. So we need to really identify what they are, Nicole. And the easiest thing for me to distinguish between, is this a cultural, a knowledge, or a skill thing that I can train, is the question which you probably have heard in our videos. If I was a fly on the wall, what would I see people do? Because safe at work, for example, is a feel thing. I feel comfortable walking through the front doors, saying hi to people, or when I'm walking through the front doors, I am like, I don't want to be here today. I hate my job. I want to get out of here, right? So that's a feely thing,
yeah,
which we can't train. However, sure, what we can train, if I was a fly on the wall, how can we make that person feel comfortable walking through the doors? Well, it might look like greeting everyone in the corridor that you meet with eye contact and saying, hey, and smiling. Like, that is at the smallest level, it is a behavior we can train. So is our training on the skills of being a better human, such as smiling, like, what do you call it, including people and asking them, this is a skill, would you like to sit with us at lunch today? You know, so what I would be doing is working out, if I was a fly on the wall, what would I see people do so that I can identify this is all the stuff that we can train on. And then we'll also have a list of other things that are cultural things.
Mm.
And then what we have is, it might come out in a Word document, right? Where, okay, we can do training on these things, but we've also identified these levers here that if we change them in the cultural space, that will have a bigger impact over time. But I believe, as the instructional designer, it's out of the scope of your training solution. But if you really care, Mr. Boss or Mrs. Boss, about making this a safe work environment and all the things that you're saying are important, we actually need to take a pause and scope this out as a problem that we are committed at PickGov to solve.
Mm.
Mm.
And it's kind of putting it out there as a separate conversation. So we can, and that will be the whole thing around, do we do the training? You know, do you want us to still go ahead with the training? This kind of comes down to, do they care about solving the problem, or are they just trying to show up and pretend that they care about the particular problem?
Mm.
So we can create the training on these things, and this is what it's kind of covered, because through our work and our process, our action mapping, we've discovered that.
Mm.
But really, if we want to change the culture here at our organization, or as a country, or as a society, we actually need to focus on these things.
Mm.
And I would use a story. There's a really good book that I've just finished called Upstream. I can't remember the author, but it's a blue cover with like a little, those things that they throw into the ocean. What are they when someone's drowning?
Lifebuoy?
Yeah. It's got one of them on the front. So Upstream. And what it talks about is solving problems before they even begin. So if this is where a story will come in and help support your argument for, this is bigger than training. Training's not going to solve this.
Mm.
So a story is, in the book they use it, where they go, your house is broken into and your keys and phone and wallet are taken. Now, to solve the problem in future, what they could do is install alarms, right? And lock your door when you go out so that it doesn't happen again. Cool. But what if that person, say they're a 17-year-old or a 30-year-old that broke in, why did they break in the first place? What is it about their life, their environment, that has led them to do that action? What if we worked on that? What happened in their school life? What happened when they were a younger kid? And then if we go upstream again, what was it about their upbringing, the parents, whether they were present or not, and the things that they nurtured in that person, their child, at a young age? And what do we need to focus on if it was a single mum, for example, that would have supported her better to nurture and love her child, so that when they were 17 or 30, they didn't have the need to break into someone's house? So we can tell stories like this to go, wouldn't it be cool if we had an impact in this way?
Mm. Mm.
And yeah, I guess that's a little bit of it. And another part of it is just focusing on, how do we replicate the real world, which is what we spoke about earlier. That's where I'm sitting. I feel like I'll get too deep into it, but yeah.
No,
what does that bring up for you?
I think you're really onto something there, and that book sounds amazing. It's and it's, when you were speaking there, I was thinking, so it's almost like a business unit or a manager or even an employee. It's something that we could consider about building your brand as a professional at work. So not only if I'm an employee and I'm building my brand, and that might come through, some kind of, I don't know what that might look like, to, at this point, to actually help someone consider or reflect on what their brand is like at work. Am I the person that walks down the corridor in the morning and doesn't make eye contact? And just by simply making eye contact can make a difference. and it can start to build my brand as someone that's, it might be approachable, and it might be that person that walks past me, they go, oh, okay, there's obviously a window there to start a work relationship with that person. That's what's up. So yeah, building the brand and a bit of self-reflection, and whether that might look like some sort of fun explainer video or a scenario-based explainer video that might help spark some thought or reflection. But also, when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, you know, it's upstream, but it's also downstream as well. You know, and there are, as you said, there are some aspects that probably could be fleshed out that would present itself as training, but there is another bigger picture going on. So it sort of reminded me of, like, it's not just one big ship that's going from A to B, like this is where we are now and this is where we want to be. It's almost like you've got your big ship and you've got a whole lot of support ships or boats going along with that main journey. And what I end up producing for this particular project, if it does come my way, that I would be a boat helping support that bigger boat or fleet of boats too. Another bad analogy, I've got a reputation.
Oh, I love that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, you really helped me shape my thinking there. That's just, yeah, mic drop. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And I think this, like, it sounds like a big problem to solve, right? And maybe it's not just your role, Nicole. Like, this is maybe you're the enabler of this shift and the facilitator of it. So what that looks like is, you know, you used the language earlier around like the human-centered design activities. This is you stepping up to holistically solve the problem from a human-centered perspective. So instead of that one ship, there's many other support ships, which means that, you know, get your key stakeholders and who are they across the different parts of the business. And this is a non-siloed activity from your team or your specific role. You're just leading it from a curiosity place and enabling by you have the process, right, that will get the right people in the room to solve this problem together. It is a collective problem to solve, but you have the skills to do that. And that is the true value of an L&D or an organizational development team, to prove the value that they contribute to the business. And then it looks like what you're describing is, we're going to have like lunch and learns, and we're going to have posters, and we're going to have reflection journals sitting in the lunch hall, and we're going to have, I'm going like really just very plain solutions, but like retreats for specific groups of the organization, and we'll have training, and we'll have animations, and we'll have a podcast. But it opens up all these possibilities, because we know that training is not the answer. So we need to basically flood people with where we want them to be. So, you know, and I guess a good analogy, well, I don't know, maybe it's not going to turn out as a good analogy, but you're feeling in a bad mood or you're feeling in a funk, and you can choose to listen to your sad music that holds you there, right? Or if you're like, okay, I've listened to my Pink, like, you know, her whiny ones. That's actually, I'm wearing a pink shirt today. That sometimes you're like in your kind of funk and your emotion, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to get out of this. And what do? You put on some music that amps you, and you keep listening to that, and it lifts you up. Well, essentially, that's what we're doing as a learning and development like team, is we're trying to flood people with the right behaviors or the expected behaviors from all different avenues. So it just naturally happens that they become a better human being, or that personal brand comes out through everything that they're like touched by.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. That's amazing. As you mentioned, it is a very big apple to take a bite out of, but, you know, in some small way, what that might look like, you know, contributing to the picture or contributing holistically to the bigger picture, you know, it is achievable, it is doable. Yeah, thank you for helping get my thinking around that a bit better. That was really great.
Oh, good.
Awesome. Fourth tick. I do have a follow-up question. If you have the capacity to it's probably because I'm coming from my perspective of being a content developer more so than an instructional designer. Taking making instructional or making content and making learning a bit different. You know, how far do you dare to step outside the box? So typically training is you would go to your RISE course or your Storyline or whatever authoring tool you use, and you click next. I mean, that's pretty traditional, and you have 150 words on page, all that sort of stuff. But why not start to think a bit differently, have stop animation with paper cutout figures in a zombie apocalypse? I mean, you know, it sparks engagement, it sparks curiosity. Is that something that we should feel more confident in doing and putting it out there and asking the question? Or should we keep, no, training is training, and we're going to take this seriously, and maybe, and it might lean towards being a bit dry, but that's okay. Effective learning happened. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Who wants to answer?
Do you want to go, Vic, or? Yeah?
You've been called on. You have been beckoned.
I think that's really interesting. It's cool to think about other ways that we could do training, and our team has been trying to do that. So think outside of the box. But I think the best way of figuring out what will actually add value, so whether a zombie apocalypse module would add value, is to speak to the users or speak to the learners. So for us, we would conduct user interviews, and we'd want to understand our audience more and understand what motivates them and engages them. So if we discovered that they are motivated or engaged by games, or they're like they're into humor, or they're more casual, or they're more formal, I think it's really cool to think of different ideas if it aligns with your end user. So activity that we do that helps us think outside of the box, and I think we do come up with some pretty cool ideas that are human-centered and will help people learn or make their life easier, is we have like a random word generator, and we will brainstorm. So we'll understand who our audience is, we'll have that front of mind, we know what our goal is, so we have that front of mind as well. And then we have a generator that'll just bring up random words. So it might say like car. So then we all try and brainstorm and think, what's a solution that would be related to a car that'll help us meet our goal and add value to our end user? And it really helps us think outside of the box. And yeah, it changes like e-learning courses too. It could be like messages on the mugs at work that remind them, or it could be like a poster on the lunch table where they can read through and think about how to hold different conversations or something like that. Or what's some other examples we've come up with, Kim? Because we did it not long ago. Like cards they can go through, or... So yeah, I think it is really cool to think of different ways to do it, as long as it adds value to the end user and motivates them as individuals.
Yeah, not shiny for the sake of shiny.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think, Nicole?
I think that's just what you've said is amazing. You reminded me of my graphic design days when I was going through art college. It's like you've been presented with the challenge of creating a logo for a company. Well, as a graphic designer, what is it that you do to actually start that logo design process? Well, you write down keywords, you write down key colors, you write down what's fit for purpose for that audience. So I've just had an aha moment. I had that in my brain all along, but you know, it didn't even occur to me to apply that to instructional design and e-learning. So thank you for that. It's definitely something that I will start to pick up on. Yeah, but yeah, you're quite right. You know, getting to taking that human-centered design approach and actually speaking with those people who will ultimately be consuming your training, getting a feel for them, getting a feel for what it is, their work environment, how they're best going to learn, how they're best going to consume that training, will help form and shape. And I guess even just hearing myself reflect on what you just said, you know, it's no harm in asking them, hey, you know, I'm thinking about doing XYZ theme. What are your thoughts on that? And they would go, oh, that sounds really bad, or that sounds really boring, or no, that sounds really cool. You know, that's, yeah. So, you know, why not take that opportunity as you're speaking to the learners to get a feel for what the end, what the theme or what the characters or what design you might end up using. So yeah, thank you for that, Hannah.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
What do you think, Kim and Victoria?
You go, Vic.
I think the only thing I'd add is I know that we have done it in the past as well, like when we're brainstorming, is trying to think of, instead of trying to think of a solution that fits within like storyline or Rise specifically, it's just thinking like what would be the absolute best solution we could create if there was like no money constraints, no time constraints, or like make a list of like what would be the absolute best way we could train this. And then obviously when you are restricted by certain things, like pulling it back in a bit, but trying to replicate whatever that best idea was within the tool you need to use, or the time that you have, or the money that like you can spend on it basically. So like going big first and then pulling it back in, instead of just thinking, oh, it has to be storyline or it has to be Rise or whatever it is. Figure out what the best thing is and then see how you can replicate that best as best as you can within whatever constraints you have.
Totally. Yep.
Love that.
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah.
I would just add, from a mindset perspective, I just encourage people to not have all the answers. Like, we instructional designers are problem solvers. It is our role to extract information, the right information. And all we have to do is be curious and facilitate a process. So for us, that's our human-centered design playbook. And all we have to do is we know that it works, and we just have to facilitate that process because the answers are out there. It doesn't have to be Kim Tui's only perspective on the world and only person working on a storyboard and only person brainstorming solutions. It is going out there and extracting the information because it exists already. We need to co-create. So we just need to facilitate a process. So I would encourage people to have a mindset shift that we are problem solvers, and problem solvers don't have the answers, but they know how to get the answers.
Love it.
100%.
Cool. Was that your final question, Nicole? I think it was.
Yes, it was. Thank you, guys.
Amazing. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. They were like really cool questions, and it's definitely helped me personally think about things different, and talking it out with all of you has been really good. So yeah, well done. Because we can't think of questions. We're like, what can we ask? But that was so refreshing to have you here and like for you to come with those questions. So that was, amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Cool. I think are you happy to wrap it up, Kim?
Go for it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. It's been an absolutely incredible episode. We've had Nicole here asking questions. So much value has come out of this episode, and I know that you're going to get value from it. So yeah, I'm feeling super excited, and it's been an awesome episode. And thanks again, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you.